like to call to order the Londonderry Budget Committee. Tonight is June 24th at 7 p.m. Let's start with Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Kipp, please lead us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to remain standing just for a moment of silence to remember our first responders and essential workers and everybody that has given back to this community. I personally say thank you for all that you do. Please be seated. All right. Just so everyone knows, we have two opportunities for the public to come and have a public comment time. I do remind everyone that we are the Budget Committee. We hear budget-related items. As mentioned, we do have 5 minutes per person. At this time, I'd like to open the floor if anyone would like to address the council, or I'm sorry, the school board publicly.
The Budget Committee.
Thank you, that one.
Yeah.
I hit the council, school board. I know. All right, seeing none, let's move forward to old business. Acceptance of May 27, 2021 minutes. I did send it out. Has everyone had a quick chance to look at it?
Just the last paragraph, I think Peter was saying that stated that people should not make assumptions, I'm assuming, that's what you wanted to say? Instead of should have assumptions?
Okay. On the last page?
First page.
First page?
Almost second to the last paragraph.
Got it. Anything else, Mr. Kay?
Yes, excuse me. Christine Patton asked that her letter be read into the record. So I recommend we make that letter part of the record, either in the body of the minutes or as an attachment.
We'll do it as an addendum. Okay. All right. Anything else? All right. Do I have a motion to accept May 27, 2021 as amended?
So moved.
All right. I have a motion from Mr. Kipp. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. Second from Steve. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Motion passes 5-6-5-0. All right, new business, budget planning process. So last month, we discussed having the superintendent and the town manager come in and give us a 30,000-foot view of the upcoming budget and the upcoming year, any projections that they may have. And I have asked Mr. LaLiberty and Mr. Smith. I have them both here in attendance. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming. I do have Mr. Smith listed as first. Kevin, if you both want to come up and brief, if flip a coin, it's really, all right.
Yeah, why not?
So again, thank you both for taking the time to come in and talk to us. And just as a reminder, 30,000-foot view and kind of looking for projections and any brief overview of any assessments that you have regarding status of your budgets.
Sure. So I guess I'll kick things off here. Unlike the Curro and Campo show last time of the 20-page PowerPoint presentation, we're not going to bore you to death with that. But as you have said, kind of a 30,000-foot overview of what to expect going into this next budget season. On the town side, shouldn't be any surprise. I expect what the town council will recommend as we go into the planning process, which starts in early fall, will be to present a default budget. We've been at a default budget now since 2011, and as I explained in the last budget process, which I feel like we went over the budget pretty thoroughly this last time around and literally going through almost line by line, is that when you look at it in terms of on the expense side of personnel expenses versus non-personnel expenses, while we are able to increase our non-personnel lines by things that they are contracted for through the collective bargaining agreements, being in a default budget means we cannot increase those non-personnel lines. And what's happened over time is that even though we haven't increased those lines, those expenses have obviously continued to go up. And so we have been covering non-personnel expenses with savings, if you will, in the personnel expense line through either retirements or positions not being filled readily, particularly in police and in fire. And that more or less has to do with just the arduous recruitment process. It's getting a lot more difficult to recruit good people. And also, we have a pretty comprehensive background process that all of them have to go through, which is great because it means when we do get someone who passes the background process, we're getting a quality candidate. But a lot of people do get weeded out through that process. And so, again, I would expect something very similar to what we've seen in past years when we present this year's budget. Something else of note is you may recall when I came in with the fiscal year 22 budget last year, we were still in the midst of the pandemic. And so we were somewhat uncertain about where revenues would fall. And I had said at the time that something you may want to do is freeze certain lines until you know what your actual revenues are going to be versus actually cutting them. Ultimately, we did cut, I think, $250,000 from the budget last time, which is fine. But I would note that all of the concerns we had about revenues not hitting their mark or not getting as much as we were going to get from the state never came to fruition. And so in hindsight, it was probably good that we did not cut more than what we did because as I explained during the last budget process, even though you may get higher revenues than what you expect, you can only spend up to what has been appropriated. So it's not like you can say, okay, we cut this line, now you have the revenues, so you can restore that line. You cannot do that. And so I think it was probably a prudent idea to, at that time, reduce the budget by $250,000 and not more than that. But we have far exceeded our revenue numbers thus far, and we'll certainly provide an update for you after June 30th to give you exactly what those numbers are. I am expecting our revenue projections for the fiscal year 23 budget to go up, both in what we receive from the state, especially with the budget passing today as it did in Concord. I expect state revenues to be higher for the town, but also actual revenues, things like car registration, to be higher as well. Same thing with building permits. So that is one area, in revenues I do expect to increase when we're formulating the next budget. Probably the most difficult thing is going to be something that's largely out of our control, which is the loss in value from the power plant. We have reached a settlement agreement with them. It's not my intention to get into the details of the terms of that tonight. We're actually going to be discussing that at the next town council meeting in July. We're bringing in Attorney Ramsdell to talk about that as well. So everyone has a clear understanding of what that settlement means in terms of both loss and valuation from the power plant as well as back money owed to them from abatements that they have been putting in since 2017 and how that could impact the tax rate setting process. It doesn't impact the budget per se, but it does impact your tax rate because it's, part of the rate is set by what the town valuation is. And obviously, losing value from the power plant is a significant loss. So again, that will be discussed in full detail at the town council meeting in July. And that impacts not only the town's tax rate, it impacts the school's tax rate, which Scott is aware of, as well as the county and the state tax as well. So that is a kind of down and dirty, quick overview of the what I'm expecting for the town budget going into fiscal year 23.
Do I have any questions for Mr. Smith at this time?
Just real quick, Kevin, on the valuations of homes, when is that next cycle? When does that take place?
So we're actually going through that right now.
Oh, okay.
And that is also something that we'll be discussing in public at the next meeting as well. The last one was in 2019.
Okay.
At that time, we had discussed, the council and myself in public, about going to an every 2-year valuation as opposed to every 5 because of what was a pretty big increase in the 5 years between when we had done it in 2014 and then 2019. A lot of the larger communities have been going to every 2 years. Probably was the wise thing to do. If you're looking at the sale of homes right now in Londonderry, it is it's unlike anything I've ever seen. And frankly, it's all of southern New Hampshire. But Londonderry, I mean, you can just, all I have to do is open up the sales every Friday in the paper and see what homes are going for. And if you research and look online at what the valuations are, the current assessments are of those homes, some of them are at 70% of what the market is. And so that is something that is also taking place right now.
Okay.
We talked about this last year, and you mentioned it again tonight, how due to retirements and whatnot, some of the, what I'm going to call excess, if that's the appropriate word, some of the excess funds in the personnel line get used to cover other expenses in the community. And I seem to recall, I don't remember whether it was you, Scott, or you, Kevin, or maybe both of you last year said we're going to try to, for example, typically when there's an open position, the budget is for a family plan on the health insurance.
Yep.
But I think one or both of you said, well, we're going to try to more accurately predict which plan, for example, to try to save some of that money in the personnel line.
Right. I think it was us that talked about doing that, and Scott, you may have talked about it as well. And we can certainly do that. The question is where do you want the savings to be? Do you want it to be up front, or do you want it to be on the back end? You'll see that when we end this fiscal year, we're ending it with a significant surplus, which is a really good thing given how much money we owe back to Granite Ridge Energy, because literally that surplus, I intend anyway for it to start going towards those abatement credits, which we're going to owe them. And that was one of the things heading into June that we told the departments is look at, you know, even though you may be running a surplus right now, only purchase those things you were intending on purchasing anyway. This isn't a license to now go out and purchase things, you know, that were on the wish list, if you will, because we're essentially putting aside those monies to prepare for what are going to be significant payments to Granite Ridge. So, you know, if we try to, we budget personnel at 100%, as you were saying, we budget for family plans. If we try to hit that target a little closer, that will reduce the budget. And so will that then have a corresponding effect on the tax rate when you set it? Yes. But then that also reduces at the end of the year what your surplus could be. So then there's less money to go towards that credit. So it's one half dozen or the other, really, the way you look at it.
Yeah, and, excuse me, and thank you for that. And I wasn't suggesting that maybe we do try to hit it more accurately, but some of the feedback, a little bit of feedback I've gotten from members of the public is, well, if that's the cushion, why can't we budget some of the other lines that benefit from that more accurately so that the budget is a stronger tool? And you the guys,
that is something that we should look at doing, particularly when it comes to health insurance. You know, I'd be a little nervous of taking money from personnel, from actual positions, and shifting it over to the non-personnel lines, because now what essentially you're saying is you can't fund those. If you need those people, you can't fund them now. Sure. But on the health insurance lines, could we get it closer and budget more accurately? Yes. Worst case scenario, if we were off and we didn't budget enough, then we simply would take from the non-personnel lines and put them back over to the health insurance.
So,
yeah.
Again, just trying to think of the budget as a more accurate tool, not a, because if somebody wasn't paying a lot of attention, the view could be, well, anything left over in personnel covers so much else in the budget, which I know you're very well aware
Yep.
of. So just
Right.
wanted to put that on the table.
Yeah, and hopefully people understand that, again, the fact that we're turning in surpluses, which are largely from the personnel lines, means that we're not spending them on non-personnel related
Good point.
items,
Yep.
right? It's, it's not like we're saying, well, because we have it here, now we can spend it over here. We're not doing that. It's just that because of retirements and attrition and the recruiting process, we just end up having those surpluses.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Any questions? Joseph,
I have a follow-up.
please.
What about projects in general? I mean, the cost, Bob can attest to this too, the cost of projects is outrageous right now. Do we plan on holding off on some things now and maybe hoping maybe later on in the year that prices will start to stabilize at a lower rate, or?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing we really held off on was, most projects are done separately from the budget. They're done in the warrant articles. The only thing we did end up holding off on was the addition that we were initially going to do here,
Yeah.
just because the cost of construction went up so much that the council and I thought it was best to not put that on, to ask for additional funding on the last warrant. And I don't see that happening again, although I know, Bob's been talking about looking at the school district office there as a replacement. So, So yeah, I don't see any big projects. I mean, we just don't have any large projects at this time. Where it probably impacts it the most is in the expendable maintenance trust. When we have to do maintenance projects, if it requires a significant amount of lumber or just construction materials in general, we may not be able to do as many things as we had planned on, and only doing emergency repairs anyway, just because of the cost of construction and the way that's gone up.
Yeah. So that I think it's my last point is we've got wage inflation too, right? We've got, you lose someone, you're gonna hire someone, more likely you're gonna have to pay more.
Right.
It sounds like we've got a number of factors here that are contributing to a higher tax rate. You just mentioned Granite Ridge. We've got that. We have valuations possibly. We've got wage inflation. We've got expenses, things that just cost more. I mean, I'm just looking at it from a very high level. That's what I'm seeing.
Yeah, I mean, the big one's going to be Granite Ridge.
Okay.
The reval is, if all things were equal, a reval shouldn't result in a higher tax rate, because if everything were happening equally, if your valuation goes up, your rate comes down. So while your home may be assessed higher, the rate would then be lower for everyone. What's happened, though, is the value of residential dwellings has gone up significantly faster than commercial. So not everything is equal. Not everything's gone up 100%, or gone up equally. And so what happens there is you then have a shift of the tax burden from commercial to residential. And it's not that commercial properties are getting a tax break. They're not. It's just that there's a science to all of this. It's not a subjective process. It's very technical. It's spelled out through the Department of Revenue. In our assessing department, it handles all of the formulas, and then that has to be approved by DRA. But all you have to do is look at what the sale of residential properties has been to commercial properties, especially with the pandemic, over the last couple of years. And you can see how residential has gone up at a much higher rate than what commercial has gone up. And so that's where the tax shift is. But in terms of, if someone were to say, well, the tax, what is causing the tax rate to go up? The budgets have been pretty lean. I think the last budget we just passed was under 2% in terms of an increase. And typically what would happen is your increased valuation would offset that, because the higher your valuation is, that means the less you have to raise in taxes. But in this case, when you have a drop in the value, which in the 8 years I've been town manager, we've never once had a drop in valuation. This may be the first year that happened simply because of Granite Ridge. And they just happen to be the largest taxpayer in Londonderry when they're paying 11% of the taxes. So that is something that's going to be felt. But we're also looking at ways to try to head that off. And one of the ways you can do that is through our fund balance. I've talked to Scott and Peter about their fund balance to try to offset that, because nobody wants to see, everybody get their taxes in December and say, what the heck happened here? So there's a lot of education that goes into it. But again, I think there are tools we have in the toolbox to try to offset that, that increase as well. And then the other thing I would add to that is it's also why we're being so aggressive in trying to lure in new industrial and commercial development, because the faster we can do that, the quicker we can then offset that valuation loss with Granite Ridge. And so we're really just trying to pull out all the stops that we can. We just created the TIF district off of exit 4A. I will tell you there's a lot of interest right now. I have a running list in my office that's probably about 10 items long right now of potential big users, both in the area of exit 4A, Woodmont, as well as Pettingill Road. If half of those end up coming in, it'll go a long way toward making up for that valuation loss from Granite Ridge. And so, we're doing our best to make it very attractive for them to want to set up shop here.
Do you have any comments, questions?
Actually, sorry for being late. Can I ask, what was the total amount of loss that we're anticipating?
It's unknown. It's going to be discussed in July's council.
Yeah, what I had mentioned is that at the next town council meeting, we'll be going over that in detail.
Okay.
Yeah.
Joseph?
All right, just a couple quick questions. You had mentioned the increase of building permits and registrations and stuff. Has there been a bell curve? Has that started to come down a little bit, or is it still on the increase?
Not that we've seen.
Okay. Good.
People are still putting additions on, and despite the cost of construction, residential permits for all sorts of things are still at a very high rate right now. And the same thing with car registrations as well.
Is there any tax benefit for the town with Manchester Airport bringing in another airlines?
No, I mean, we have the pilot payment, which goes up 2% every year from them. But what that may mean is that, the rental car companies hopefully start coming back because they had reduced a lot of their fleet around the airport. Right. And so if they start coming back with their cars, that means more car registration fees for the town.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then you mentioned the evals for residential. Your plan was to go every other year. Mm-hmm. You cut that a little bit short, and did you say that we're currently doing another eval?
We're doing one this year. So the last one we did was in 2019. So this would be this if we start going on the every other year schedule.
So you're following your plan.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then how often is commercial? I know that you had mentioned that the rate of increase of valuation for commercial industrial properties is a lot slower than residential. How often do you do the evaluations for those types of properties?
Well, I mean, there's a cyclical, so every 5 years we visit 20% of the town, right? Just to do cyclical updates. Okay. But when we do these town-wide revals, every property gets revaled. So it's 100% of the entire town.
Okay.
Otherwise, if you're not on a reval year, it's usually just properties that we know have had work done to them. And we know that by building permits that they've pulled. And that includes both commercial and residential.
And for the residential, that's handled in-house. For commercial, that's
it used to be.
Okay.
So the way we used to do it is all residential used to be handled in-house, and we would contract out for commercial. With The group that we hired now, Whitney Consulting, Steve Hamilton, they do both commercial and residential. So we're no longer, we contract with them, but they're the ones who are doing both.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit, either or, talk about just the communication that you've had regarding the Granite Ridge? I know, Kevin, you briefly touched on it. I do know that the chairman of the town council did discuss with the school board about anticipated. I guess I don't really need to know your communication. Just strongly suggest that there is, and I'm sure there is, obviously, both you seated together, that there's an open line of communication and dialogue regarding that, and just strongly recommends, that it's conducive for a healthy, tax rate for between the both. So, does anyone else have any questions for Mr. Smith? All right, Mr. Liberty.
My turn. Well, as we look ahead to the FY23 budget, we're going to be building up our focus right now, which would be quite obvious, is for us to get back to normal school, to put it simply. And we're working on that literally as we speak, putting together fall programming. I don't see any major programmatic adjustments in FY23. I think we'll see a similar situation to the one on the town side, where our target will be at that default level from a budgetary standpoint. Because a lot of the work, as I think I mentioned last time I was here, which I believe now is 2 years ago, because we weren't here last year, were we? We talked a lot about how the work that we're doing inside the district is on things like professional development and instructional strategies and curriculum development, which has very marginal costs attached to it. By and large, the work is done internally. It's done in-house. So we want to get back to that. We had done some nice work in that area, and we're really in a good place, and along came COVID and shifted our entire focus for what became 16 months. So that's really what we're looking to as far as getting back to that. And as I said, it's not something I would that I would anticipate having a major budget impact as far as the instructional program end of things. A few other things, though, that the Budget Committee certainly would want to bear in mind. We are moving ahead with our facilities study, our 10-year master plan development process. And in July 20th meeting, we will be hearing the preliminary results of the current use assessment and educational programming assessment that was done by the Trident Group and LBA. So that'll be at the July 20th meeting. There aren't any, we're not at a point yet where they're recommending any kind of projects or anything like that. But basically, this is an assessment of our current state of affairs in all of our buildings, things that we need to be aware of that are potential future cost items. That's not an area I've done a lot of work in, to sit down and look at a 300-page document in the level of detail. I have had to rely on Mr. Slater and some of his friends to walk me through that. The level of detail is really incredible that this report has gotten into. I did get a chance to see a first draft of it, and it's pretty impressive. So that'll all be spelled out at the July 20th meeting. As I believe was mentioned earlier, I think Kevin mentioned it. I know that Bob has been tasked or has been validated, I guess, by the board to move ahead with some research on potential district office sites and for long term. And I'm sure that's also going to be tied in to the long range master plan that comes out of this process. So that's certainly something to keep an eye on. Another thing that I wanted to make sure was on your radar, which is certainly on ours, we are coming into the third year of a 3-year collective bargaining agreement with the Teachers Association and with our allied health professionals. So we have received an intent to bargain notification from both unions, and we will begin the process of negotiations this summer. At this point, that's really all I have on that front. But it's obviously a long process, and I can't believe 3 years has gone by already since we last engaged in that process. So that's coming up this summer, and that'll be a factor for us as we develop our next budget as well. I'd probably rather use the rest of my time to answer your questions. Obviously, a lot of things going on at the moment, but I'd rather speak to things that are on your mind. So.
Anyone have any questions for the superintendent?
I have one. I was listening to the meeting, school board meeting, Monday, I guess, or Tuesday.
Tuesday, yeah.
And they had also announced that they're doing the school tours, but they moved them and stuff for the annual, like, we do this every year, we go walk through. Is that posted up on the website? Because I didn't see it, the new updated dates when they're doing that?
Yes, those should be up now. I'll certainly check to make sure, but because of the way the calendar fell, we had a board meeting on that Tuesday night. So we're going to do Wednesday and Thursday. It'll be a week where we spend lots of quality time together, but we took a look at maybe doing them all in one night, and that's a marathon.
That's a lot.
Yeah, that's a marathon. So we thought it was better for us to schedule it out. So it will be that Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
The reason I ask is because usually a lot of the budget committee members will go through it that haven't seen them, so they understand where the money is and where the school issues are and stuff, so. But I didn't catch the dates, so that's why I was wanting to make sure that it was up there.
Can you do me a favor? Can you validate those, just, get with the superintendent, verify that information, then send it to Jonathan?
I have the
I'll send it
dates.
out to you.
Okay.
When we do our meeting planning at the end of our meeting tonight, I'll share them with you. They're on the website. I put them in my calendar, so I'm
Perfect.
happy to share
Okay,
that.
Thank you.
great, thank you.
Perfect.
Any other questions?
Yes, several, or a couple at least. Just help me please understand the negotiation process, if everything goes smoothly and is successful. Whatever the budgetary impact of the negotiations is, would show up on the ballot next March?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So
Yeah,
then that would be part of
it's what the term that's used is it would be Sanbornized, which is a really long story. But in effect, what we are required to do is if we reach a 3-year agreement, just for example, as the last one was, on the ballot, all 3 years would be laid out with tax impact.
And then, this is an ironic question to ask. My understanding is the school district expended a lot of money to comply with COVID. Are we gonna have to spend more money to uncomply with COVID in the coming year to get back to normal?
That's a great question, actually. The short answer is no. We have been very fortunate to have received, at this point, when ESSER 3 is complete, we'll be at about $3.4 million in federal assistance. That has offset a lot of the costs that we've incurred. We have made some improvements in the facility. We have HEPA filters now in the classrooms. There are a lot of things that are going to be around for a long time. So it actually may be quite the opposite, that we may reap the benefits of some of the mitigation that has taken place. Looking ahead, we do have some projects slated for the ESSER 3 money that would improve fresh air intake, upgrades in our HVAC system. And I'll tell you, just from a procedural standpoint, the work that was done by Chuck Zappola and his crew as far as cleaning and sanitization and that sort of thing, a lot of those are going to stay. We're still going to use some of those techniques to make sure that we stay. So
One more, if I may. So for both of you, I read in the paper, I hear from you about just the number of grants we're getting, and I don't think we need a laundry list of all the grants that you've applied for and received, and good for you, thank you very much. There was some confusion early on with some of the federal money coming in about whether or not it could be used to offset the tax rate. Where are we on that? So my question is, of all the grants we're receiving, how much of that, if any, will be able to be used to reimburse and therefore offset taxes?
it's my understanding it is not allowed to offset the tax rate. However, we have been able to do a lot of projects on the school end that won't be coming up onto the tax rate, things like HVAC upgrades, roof repairs, and that sort of thing. So I don't know if you have a different situation on the.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any grant money that can be used to offset the tax rate. However, there are FEMA reimbursement funds that we've applied for to offset expenses particularly in the fire department.
Personnel.
But those are the only ones I'm aware of that can offset expenses. The rest of it have to be used for something.
Or something.
Yeah.
And if I feel more certain than not that both Mr. Curro and Mr. Campo both said that the grants cannot be used to offset the tax rate. But as Mr. Smith said, that personnel, the expenses for personnel for the fire and police is a little different. So, any other questions?
The only thing I would add to that is that
Thank you.
we did just get a grant approval from the Clean Drinking Water Commission to do the Lancaster Drive project, which a warrant article had passed last March to use $250,000 of taxpayer funds to get that completed. Now that we have those grant monies, we won't have to spend the taxpayer dollars to do that project. So that's, $250,000, which will stay in the general fund and not be used.
That's great.
Yeah.
One-to-one, are we doing that? Or are we not doing that? We kind of halfway are, but halfway aren't. So I was curious.
I think that's probably the best way you could put it. Because of what we've had to do through COVID with the deployment of devices, we are able to issue laptops. We've replaced a lot of our desktop units with laptop units. It's not a true one-to-one in that the laptops are being issued in much the same way that a textbook would be. Students don't own them. But they will be issued one. Freshmen and sophomores next year will be issued one, and then they'll maintain it and then return it. So it's not a true one-to-one where the student might have an opportunity to purchase it or anything like that. And a lot of that has come about not just because of the physical devices, but after a year and a third of hybrid instruction, of remote instruction, of all of these different things. This has dramatically accelerated our deployment of the technological side of the curriculum,
Right.
right? I mean, we had no choice. Something like Google Classroom was something we were introducing a year before COVID. Everyone uses it now because they had to. It's a learning management system. So it's the way assignments are given and returned in and that sort of thing. I would say top of my head, in the last year, if we looked at our projected horizon as far as implementation of a lot of the tools that we've been using, we probably jumped ahead between 3 and 5 years in a year because we had no choice. So
The reason I asked that was because we were looking at the budget for doing a one-to-one or not doing a one-to-one, and
Right.
it was kind of going to be the same cost because we were going to transition
Yep.
equipment and stuff like that. But with COVID and everything, and we actually have grant money that assisted in the remote and mobile learning
Right.
in order for COVID and stuff, so that kind of, in a way, kind of offset some of the cost to the townspeople for going remote and be able to do that. So I'm just trying to think of how much of that we're going to keep in place, and how much of that are we looking at doing down the future without really, using the same budget and just trying to transition and stuff.
Yeah.
Because we did talk about, once we did go 4 years and get that full transition, there will be, I don't want to, I scare people when I say an additional cost, but the normal money that we put in for like refurbishing and repairing and stuff like that, some of that stuff goes away, but then we have to buy laptops for the incoming class, in a way, because if we go one-to-one. But they also forget that we don't have the maintenance, repair, and all the other stuff we have to buy for the laptops that would be rolling around on carts. So it's not a true one-to-one offset, but it's close when you're talking about $80 million. So I was wondering kind of how you see that whole cost structure going as we're doing the remote mobile stuff.
if I go back, I think I'm getting blurry now. I think it's 2 years. We had a discussion. Our goal was to try to transition to a one-to-one deployment model without asking the taxpayers for any additional money.
Right.
A lot of districts will do that. They'll do it as a warrant article, right? I know of another district that 4 years, one shot, $1.2 million, and everybody got computers. We don't want to do that. I think we can do better than that if we're patient and deliberate about it. That's why we've been working at that. As I said, we've cycled out desktop units, which are tough to replace anyway. If you go into any store now and try to buy a desktop unit, there aren't many there. So it's much more economical for us to buy laptop units anyway. So to be able to cycle those out with our replacement cycle, we feel like we can make that transition. The COVID has certainly helped that because we had no choice. We had to add to our stocks. Grant money was used for that. That's what it was intended for. And as I said, the software piece and the ancillary materials, learning materials have accelerated that too. So we're really we look very closely next year at how that goes, that deployment idea. And we believe we can then cycle those through as well, and keep that cost down to the greatest degree possible. We always say the holy grail in public education is when you can improve your programming and either keep your costs the same or better yet, lower them. And that's really what we're trying to do with this, is we're trying to hit that mark.
I remember Mr. Black was talking about the offset of having textbooks electronically versus physical and stuff. I don't recall what he said. Maybe you can help me remember. Is the electronic version, the licensing for that, more cost effective than having a physical textbook? Or
The initial cost is not. Publishing companies very rarely lose an opportunity to make money, and they're private companies. We can't blame them for that. However, what you do gain in going to those electronic resources is you don't have to go back to the well as often on updates.
okay.
Upgrades. I sheepishly admit, that in, my high school senior class, I think the U.S. history book, Lyndon Johnson was president in the history book. That we don't worry about that anymore. It wasn't that old. He was laughing at me. He's younger. So what winds up happening is either you have outdated materials or you're spending money to upgrade and update and all the time. With the electronic resources, you don't have to do that. There is an outlay at the front though, and I won't tell you we save a ton of money on that. We get better materials in there, and the president is correct in the history books. So
Thank you.
sure.
Any other questions?
It's real quick, Scott. I remember my first year on the budget committee, during one of the meetings, we were talking about enrollment numbers decreasing. And I made a comment about, more kids are going online, like VLAX, right? And I remember a comment that was made that, kids want to be in school. Has that changed now because of COVID?
I think they want to be in school more now.
Okay.
We do have some kids. It's been really interesting for us. We do have some kids that thrived in remote instruction. But I think probably the most telling moment for me was when we did go remote during the spike, and then we came back after MLK Day, and I was out walking around in the schools. The kids were ecstatic to be back. I think what it did is it accentuated the value of the in-person piece. That said, I will tell you one of the things we're looking at very closely. I think we've learned a lot about what role virtual resources, remote resources can play, even for kids who are learning in person. And the technology piece is just one element of that. I could see us getting a lot better over the next couple of years at making better use of some of those virtual resources and that sort of thing. If you look at smaller school districts, a lot of times, if you want to take a foreign language that isn't offered in your school because you only have 200 kids in your high school, you go to VLAX, and you can take the course and get credit through that. Larger schools don't always necessarily do that. But I think you'll see that change. I think you'll see more of that happening now. So
Good.
Yep.
Anyone else? I do have. Did you say yes? I do have a question. How long is just about the abatements? And I don't want to take away from July's meeting and stuff. How did I hear you correctly? Did you say that prior abatements and current year's abatement is going into effect or is part of the whole situation?
Correct. So they had been applying for abatement since 2017. So there are abatement settlements for 17, 18, 19, 20. But as part of the settlement, we've also agreed to a valuation for the current tax year, as well as 22 and 23. Prior to 2016, we had long-term when I say long-term, 3 to 5 year agreements with Granite Ridge on valuation. So this sort of thing wouldn't happen. When they were purchased by Calpine out of Texas, they were previously owned by a local outfit, and then Calpine bought them. The communications broke down, and we attempted to establish another agreement with them that would set the valuation, and hadn't heard anything from them. And the first thing we heard was when they sent us the abatement request in 2017. But that then just began a process of trying to get information from them, in which we weren't getting information from them, and so it continued on. The hope would be never to get into a situation like this again, where there's just unresolved abatement requests for so many years, that then get settled years later, because it has put the town in a little bit of a predicament.
So, to pivot off of that, started in 2017, 18, 19, 20, 21, and then following years. Looking back, and you mentioned the breakdown in communication when they were purchased by the Texas company and stuff like that. What can we do differently to prevent this from happening again?
In hindsight, it maybe would be to get a little bit more aggressive in trying to get them to provide information to us so that we can make a better assessment as to what their valuation is. But again, it's not like we weren't asking for the information. We were. And, that was part of my frustration with them when we were having settlement talks is, and I explained to them that, look, I've got a paper trail of emails in trying to come to an agreement in which we've got, or asking for discovery, in which we were just getting radio silence from them. And so, it's not like we didn't tell them this is what we're going to be valuing you at. We did. But we got very little in the way of, when you put in an abatement request, you're supposed to explain why you believe, your valuation isn't what we have valued you at. And when you get a paragraph on a plant that is valued at almost $500 million, you need a little bit more than that, and so that was part of the frustration, is that we weren't getting a lot of communication from them.
So being more aggressive in regards to communication, having proper service notice and stuff like that, I'm sure are probably ways, hindsight, looking at hindsight is how to handle that. Is there any way that we can put forth like some sort of contract or agreement to, as you mentioned, there was an agreement with the previous owners. Is there any way that we can put something in place for the current?
Well, we've done that. And so the current settlement agreement, as I said, has it going out now to tax year 23. And so what we will do long before, the plan would be long before we get to 24's value, because as you'll learn at the town council meeting, a large portion of their valuation is based on the value of their commodity, which is natural gas. And they're outselling it years in advance at a certain price. So you can kind of predict what their value is going to be into the future. So we'll be able to do that. But the idea is to, in tax year 23, look at, say, tax years 24, 25, and 26.
Okay.
So again, we're not in this predicament. I do think a large part of it had to do, if it had stayed under the previous ownership, I don't think we ever would have been in this situation. It's because the ownership changed and all the players changed, and there was just not a lot of communication.
Yeah, I mean, I think regardless of the ownership change, we're still in a sticky situation, and, you know, unfortunately, both your budgets might be affected, our budgets, you know, the tax rate and stuff like that, and I appreciate the fact that, you know, you had mentioned, you know, we're putting in measures to prevent that from happening again. I think that's, you know, a wise approach and stuff.
Well, and it's unique too because, again, they're paying 11% of the tax base in town. There's no other taxpayer that comes close to that. I mean, we've had abatement requests from other utilities, Eversource being one of them. Trying to think who else has applied for abatements. It's been a large user, but even those where we've had to go back and give credits, it's never been anywhere in the magnitude of what Granite Ridge is.
Fact, right. So as basic as I can get, an abatement is you value the property here, they say they're worth here. They give justification, as you said, you know, for a $500 million, you know, property, they give this or whatever. And then, as you mentioned, that there's a settlement or a negotiation period where they, you know, a little give and take and stuff like that, and try to come to an agreement. Is that the most basic explanation
much.
of abatement?
Yeah, pretty much.
And everybody is afforded an opportunity of requesting abatement. But one thing I want to point out, and I had asked Justin this, you run the risk of, if you're valued at a lower amount, so like hypothetically, you value my house at $300,000, I file an abatement for $250,000, but then it comes out after evaluation that my house is really worth $350,000, my taxes increase. You run that risk.
Well,
correct?
but that's very rare.
Right.
It's very,
Especially for residential.
absolutely. It's rare it ever works in the opposite direction. You know, it's kind of like the equalization ratio. I've talked about that before. The state, New Hampshire, is very unique in that they set an equalization ratio for every town that tells you what your assessment is compared to market. And if you're below 90%, that's when you get a flood of abatement requests from commercial properties, because what they're basically saying is, you're taxing us, you're assessing us at 100% of our value, but you should only be doing it at 88% of the value, because that's what the equalization ratio is. Well, what do you think happens if we were at 105% and we said, we're going to send you a supplemental tax bill for the extra 5% you didn't pay? It doesn't work that way. You know, it only works in one direction, similar to the abatements. The only way I could see that happening the way you describe is if we discovered there was an in-law apartment put on that we had no idea about because someone didn't pull a permit. In that case, then yes. But otherwise, you know, if someone goes through that process, we're basically, the abatement process is only for someone to make the argument that they think their value should be lowered. I think it would be a rare circumstance where we would ever increase the value.
Thank you. Going back to the communication, everything between the two forms of government and stuff, I plan on reaching out to both the chairs, the school board and the council, to see if we can do another joint meeting. I think, you know, where we can have an open dialogue, you know, I think that would be very beneficial. I think the last one went pretty well. I know there's a long brief about retirement system and the tax rate and everything, but I think that'd be a good, you know, obviously it's more so the chairman of the school board and the council's decision, but I definitely will see if that's something they'll be open to. If it's all right with you, I'd like to, I know I have two people in attendance from the public. I want to see if anyone had any questions, if it's all right for the two leaders of our forms of government. Nope. All right. Any other questions from the committee?
Just a big thank you for coming in.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
You're welcome. And if I could, I would shamelessly self-promote that Scott and I now have a podcast.
Wow.
we do.
We're two
Okay.
episodes in of Apples to Apples.
Oh,
Yes.
Apples to who came up with that name?
It was a long iterative process of us throwing ideas back and forth and ruling most of them out. But yeah, we got there.
We did.
We did.
We did get there. And it's riveting discussions, everything about school and town government. So
I like that. That's awesome.
It's actually, yeah, we had a lot of fun doing it. We have a small podcast studio at the high school that John Bolio has put together.
It's real nice.
And we're trying to get more kids to use it. So we were chatting it up, and we're both podcast listeners ourselves. I'm like, that'd be kind of cool. Maybe we can do that. And if kids see us doing it, they'll be like, anyone can do this. The old
How do you,
guys are
how do you
doing
come
it.
up with the topics? Just from buzz, what's going on in town, or?
yeah, just stuff I think the first episode was largely about, looking back on COVID and how we prepared for that and what we had to do and coming out of it. The second episode was about the structure of the government, how each side is structured and set up. So, but we take requests too, Steve. So if you've got a topic that we should talk about, we're open to doing it.
We have started getting some requests,
Oh, good.
which tells
Yeah,
me
that's
someone.
right. Yeah,
we
right,
got one
yeah.
from a teacher who actually. I said we kind of looked at each other and said, "Someone is listening to this other than the two of us and our wives and or whatever." So
But,
How do we find it? If we want to listen to it, how
linked
would
off- it's-
somebody in the public find it and listen to it if they wanted to?
it's on the school district website. There's a link to it. I believe it's under the WLLO tab. But yeah, that's we post links on that. We haven't quite cracked the big time, podcast distributors yet. We're not waiting for calls either, but we're having fun and
Good.
and it's a good way to,
Is it on the town website?
I was just going to ask.
It will be,
Thank you.
Tim. Yes.
Apples to apples.
apples to apples.
All right. Is it weekly podcast?
We did the first two episodes at the tail end of school because we were learning how to use the software and the equipment. We haven't booked our next one yet. We'd like to make it at least a semi-weekly, or
We don't want to give the people too much. We want them coming back for more.
How about monthly?
we'll gauge based on the interest.
And when's that July meeting for the council?
So it's either going to be July 12th or July 19th. And I apologize, I don't have the exact date. It's, there's some discrepancy about when the next council meeting is. So we'll get that squared away very shortly. I think it's going to be July 19th. But we'll make sure we get that all posted.
All right. And for my next meeting, there won't be any confusion. We are not having a July meeting. Correct.
Correct?
All right. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Yeah, thank
I really appreciate you coming in, taking
Thank
the
you.
time, and giving us that 30,000-foot view. So thank you.
Welcome.
Appreciate it.
All right.
All right. Liaison reports. So as Jonathan and I discussed, because we had the two leaders of our two forms of government in here, I'm gonna forego the town and schools liaison report unless someone really has something pressing they need to share, but I'll move into that. DPW, do we have a report on that?
There's nothing to report this month for DPW.
All right, awesome, thank you. Police?
Yeah, I spoke with Chief Hart, and we were talking about the body cameras and see where that's going, and they said he's basically putting that on hold because there are some grants that they want to see that might come along and fund that, so it sounded really good, so that's where that's going. Let's see, the hiring process, he's got, they've got a few people there, 5 or 6, I guess, in the background process looking at, so hopefully something will come out of that at some point soon. So that's about it. We talked about the surplus, and I think last time I said around 700,000. He's thinking it's lower, it might be a little lower than that now, but, and then they're talking about the cars, I guess, the lease for the police cars is coming up, and it's the outfitting of the cars that's fairly expensive.
Right.
So that's going to be a ticket item, I guess. It's, we're gonna have to start looking at.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Mhm.
Fire?
Nothing to report.
All right, CIP?
CIP, we had a meeting, and it's going to be an abbreviated process this year because, I just mentioned about the master plan, that's what we've been waiting for. So I think I just heard that the master plan presentation is going to be on the 20th. So.
For the
definitely-
school
For the
district.
school district, yeah. So I'd like to hear that, but, I think the CIP, it's, again, abbreviated process. They're not expecting any major projects taking place.
Real quick.
Go ahead, no, you're probably gonna ask the same question I was.
No, I'm not gonna ask a question, I'm gonna make a statement. I also saw that you were appointed as the chairman of the CIP
Yes,
committee,
yes,
so
yes, yeah.
congratulations
Thank you.
on that.
Thank you.
Good choice. Go ahead, Mr. Kip.
I was gonna ask who was the chairman of the,
You're gonna ask, I made a statement. All right, and as I mentioned, we're gonna forego the school and or town council update. I mean, I'll be in attendance for the council meeting for the regarding the Granite Ridge. I think that's super important. Community services grant. I wanted to just briefly touch on that. So every year, the town appropriates $50,000 for nonprofits in the community. And last year, we did things a little different. Traditionally, we would have people come in, brief the committee on how they use the funds, how the Londonderry residents are affected. We moved that to more of a streamlined process and kind of leans that whole thing up with using a Microsoft Forms platform for the application and stuff. I do want to. I would like someone to kind of lead that up. I know last year I took that under my wing with the Microsoft Forms and everything. I would like to have someone, and I'll take a volunteer, or I'll volunteer someone that might be really good with technology, but someone that can reach out to Justin and put together that process. I know last year I used my own licensing, 365 licensing for the Microsoft Forms. I think the process went really, really well. Do I volunteer that'll take that up?
I'll do it.
All right, thank you, Tim.
What's the timing, Chad?
So, anticipated, traditionally, we have presented in December our breakdown of how we want those funds to be appropriated. I would like to follow a similar timeline, and I'll move into meetings. So as July, we're not gonna have a July meeting. We typically don't. We'll stay with that. Do I have general consensus on that? Do I have any opposition to that? No? Okay. August will be the school tours. September, I would like to have, if we can, so it's the 27th, 24th. I would like to have August 1st, the application process to go live. I'd like the applications to be received no later than, what did we have last year?
10:30.
Okay, so September 30th. So I'd like to follow that process. That's the deadline for the community services grant.
August 1st to September 30th?
I think that's 2 months is appropriate time for that. Again, I'd like it to be an online forum or online, like, Microsoft Forms, and I can provide you, we can talk more.
We could talk more about how you did it last time,
Yeah.
if we could do the same thing. Be nice to get that on the town part of the town website, if we can
Right.
integrate it with that, so it's a recurring yearly thing.
Yeah.
Last I recall, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, was 18 submissions. What did you get last year or two? Do you know?
13,
13?
if I remember correctly.
Okay.
I want, so September 30th will be the deadline when they're due. I'd like the results published to the committee within 5 days of that. So now we're talking the fifth, right? And then I would like to receive everybody's breakdown 5 days before our budget meeting in October. And the reason why I say I want the breakdown from all the committee. So real quick, I know Joseph and for the residents, so 50,000, we get all applications, people request, Chad Food Pantry or whatever, request 50,000, obviously there's multiple applicants, so what we do, and what we did last year worked real well, is we each came to the table with how we wanted those funds divvied up against for all the nonprofits. We then used a formula to weight the average, bring it down to $50,000. So whatever the weighted average percentage was amongst all of us, that's how we averaged those as a weighted. We did a weighted average, and then that's how we came up. It was easy. Everybody had input. Everybody, there was a lot. I think there was a lot of value, and there was a lot. It was really. It made the process go smoothly. I'd like to do that again. Does anyone have any oppositions to that?
No opposition, but I think there was one that we had some concerns about. Was it the Girl Scouts?
It was.
Maybe defining up front, do you qualify for this? Being real clear about that.
So then,
Who will vet that? The town?
what's that?
Who vets the qualifications for the?
Town.
The town will vet them. Okay.
I know that we had to go before the council to make a determination, and Justin was looking into seeing if they were an actual 501c3, which they are. There's discussion. What was the end result from the council?
I have no idea when that was done.
Okay.
501c3 is the primary
Primary, yeah.
qualification.
Qualification.
Yeah.
And residents of the community have to benefit.
Benefit from
And there was wording on the questions, there's, the
Yep.
12,
Yeah.
13 questions
I think
that
it's
we
a
had.
service, though, was the factor on that one.
Right.
Yep.
What service does the
service,
residents of
correct.
the community? So we'll just, I think that there'll be further guidance on that. I'll provide
Yeah.
further guidance on that. I'll reach out to Justin and Kevin and, Mr. Farrell regarding that. So just to recap, August 1st to September is the live date for the survey, September 30th. October 5th, I want the results, before October 5th, I want the results from all the applications pushed out to the budget committee. October 28th is our budget meeting, so I'll say, is the 18th enough? So from the 5th to the 18th, enough for everyone to figure out how to appropriate the funds? Yes?
Sure.
Yes.
Okay, so the
I would say
18th.
more than enough, yeah.
So October 18th, I want everyone's feedback on how they want the breakdown of the funds, and then I want and then we'll discuss, we'll come to the table, and Jen, if you could do that Excel again, please, that was very helpful. We'll come back and then we'll vote on it. So, any other questions about that? Did that answer your question?
It did, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Any other discussions about anything? All right, so I do have a second opportunity for public comment. Do I have anyone that would like to address? I just ask that you state your name and address for the record, and you hear the 5-minute timeline.
Glenn Douglas, 6 Overlook Ave. I wasn't actually going to come down tonight, except I watched a lot of your meeting online. The first one I was thinking about is warrant articles. When the town requests money for something, gets voted and approved, school requests money, gets voted and approved. Generally, the school, it's probably because of scheduling, because they want to take advantage of the summer when they can do things and the kids aren't around. They're shovel ready. In fact, they've got the front of the high school blocked off right now because they're doing some sort of construction. The town, on the other hand, when we approved the parking lot, I think it took over a year for that to actually get going. Meanwhile, gasoline prices and oil prices were starting to climb. The addition over here, I believe, was approved in 2018 or 2019. Still hasn't been built. You can build a shed now for about $42,000. You know, a sheet of plywood, we bought at work, it cost us particle board cost us $43. I used to get that for about 12. Can there or should there be a time limit on warrant articles? I'm not understanding why we vote for something and it might get done. It might be 1, 2, 3 years. That was the little one. The other one, and I don't know if you guys have an answer to this because I left in the middle of the meeting, but Granite Ridge, is there any indication when this is going to hit? Because I heard comments about large increases. Tim asked how much, and we're told we'll talk about it in July. There was a town council meeting on Monday. I'm not sure this was discussed. I'm not sure we're waiting till July. As far as I understand, June's tax bill is an estimate, and December is when you gotta make everything right. If this hits this year or next year, do we have any indication? Are we gonna get hammered? Because I, for one, would like a little bit of time to figure out how much I gotta put away to pay for a bill to cover things from all the way back to 2017 with, I believe I heard, a $1.5 billion. That to me sounds like a huge amount of money. I don't understand why we're waiting till July, unless we found out about it Tuesday. That's my comment.
Thank you. I will briefly talk about the tax bill. So your upcoming tax bill is exactly half of what the previous year's taxes were. That's what your upcoming tax bill will be. In regards to the second portion of the tax bill, as you mentioned, in December, or at the end of the fiscal, in December, that is that second half plus or minus any adjustments from the set tax rate. Who else is a liaison for the town? Tim, can you do me a favor? Can you reach out to Kevin and kind of, I do have questions about the parking lot, the addition, and then how long is the process? Can you
I'll
look
find out
into
for you.
that? And then next meeting, I think it would be important to bring that up.
I was going to also, just let you know, at the next town council meeting, try to get a better, like when I asked what that was, and he said, we'll know later. I feel like that's a little long, so I was gonna ask the town council if they get us a better idea, so we get some advance warning on what it's gonna be.
Okay,
So,
please.
What's going to be?
kind of what the overall impact, they gotta have some idea. They say like
The Granite Ridge impact?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, the town council is going to discuss it at their July meeting.
But it sounds like we know.
Well-
It sounds like the town knows how much it's gonna cost us, but we're not gonna talk about it until July. And if that's gonna hit us this year, I think a lot of people would really like to know what the expected adjustment is gonna be for years. I don't have the ability to send a letter out to everyone in town and say, hey, my tax bill just went up. You have to send me $12. You know, and I don't do so bad at work. There's other people in town that are on fixed incomes that it's gonna make a difference. You know, I just got hit with our mortgage payment because they jumped up our escrow, and it sounds like they're gonna jump it up again. And when it's a big bump, they jump it up big time. And it takes them a long time to go back down.
Right.
So, that's my 2 cents.
All right, thank you, Mr. Douglas. Appreciate it. Anyone else? Name and address, please, for the record.
Marietta O'Connor, 7 Partridge Lane. So I've never done this before, so this is really official for me. So I came because I was interested to see how the Budget Committee is working. I had an opportunity to talk to Chad, and I just wanted to see what you all are doing and to see if I was interested in putting my name in as a candidate for the town council to take a place on the committee. So I appreciate the invitation. I learned a lot tonight. It seems like I am familiar with some of it. I was a Leadership Londonderry grad, so I am familiar with some of it. But it's really interesting. So something that I am interested in, and so I just wanted to introduce myself.
Great.
Any questions from the
questions?
committee? No. I just thank you for your time and for coming up, and we definitely hope to see your application. So we do have a spot, a vacancy on the committee. I do want to clarify. I know that there's something that was pushed out on the town. I did talk to Mr. Smith about this. That could cause confusion. So it mentioned that there was a 3-year term that was open. It is not a 3-year term. It was filling a current member at large that had a 3-year term. However, you're appointed until the next town election, which is in March. So I recommend, does anyone have the deadline of when the applications are due? Was it January 10th?
Somewhere in January.
Okay, look on the town, I know it was on the town Facebook page, I don't have the date, but it is an appointed position. If I remember correctly, you submit your applications to Kirby Brown, our executive assistant up at the town manager's office. She submits it to the council reviews it.
Friday, July 9th.
Thank you. Friday, July 9th. The council invites you to come in, go over your background, kind of like you just did and stuff. So I recommend anybody that would like to reach out to me and talk to me about the budget committee. Thank you for connecting with me. I think that was great, to ask questions. As mentioned, budget season is involved. It's a lot, but we get a lot out of it. And as I mentioned before, we have as a budget committee, we have the fiduciary responsibility to be the eyes, ears, and the advocate of taxpayers. So we have all different diverse backgrounds and experiences, and I think that that really helps us come together and really provide that advice and feedback to different forms of government. So
I just have one question that I'm thinking off the top of my head now. So I think you said that it goes before the town council. Is that correct?
Yes.
So do you have a say in who joins you?
So we're an advisory committee. We can advise. We do not have an executive. We're not an executive committee, and because the budget committee falls under the town, that's why the council makes that decision. So
Are you all there at the process, like when people are?
Not typically. No. Short answer, no.
I was in this very same situation. There was a vacancy. I applied. There were 3 candidates the year I did it. We all came in, the council interviewed us, and then that night they voted.
Oh,
And the
okay.
chairman of the budget committee was at that meeting and was invited to ask some questions. And at the time, it happened to be Mr. Seekman sitting down at the end. So he did ask me, each of the candidates, some questions. So
Okay.
slight involvement on behalf of the budget committee, if it works the same this time, which I'd be surprised if it didn't.
I agree.
If the town asked the chair of the budget committee, like, they had me there to sit with them too, to talk, so if Chad's there or something like that, they may ask him, looking at these, what would you recommend? Who do you like, and then they each pick who they like, so that's about the extent of usually our influence
Okay.
to them, and it's only if they ask us, so.
Okay.
So coming in the budget season, I mean, you're the first person to be here. So anybody, I definitely welcome and recommend anybody who's interested, at least, like I said, reach out to me. My email's published on a town website. I will, most likely, I will, provide my phone number and we'll have a conversation about that. But thank you very much for your
Of course.
time.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks.
All right, so as mentioned, there's no meeting July 22nd, August. What are the dates for the school tours, Mr. Kipp?
Wednesday, August 25th, and Thursday, August 26th.
All right, and those typically start at,
6 PM at one of the schools, and they typically end by 8 PM. We do 3 schools a night, so you start at one school and travel by caravan, end at the last school.
I will direct, I know that we have some veterans on the committee, but I do think every year that there's value to those tours. I will direct, I'd like everyone, unless there's an extenuating circumstance that you can't, bring it to me, we'll discuss it. But I will direct everyone to be there on the, for the 25th and 26th. Meeting after that, we have budget meeting September 23rd, and then October 28th, and then November, December is going to be the budget workshops. So the time where we have our bread, where it's our bread and butter. All right, so anything else? No?
Just real quick, Glenn came up here and mentioned a couple of questions, and I just want to, what's the process here? How do we get back to him? He's got 2 great questions, so what happens next?
So I'm gonna get, I know I asked,
I'm gonna get with Kevin.
get with Kevin. I think, given that we do not have a July meeting, it would be brought up at that time.
Okay.
If Kevin can push out some information regarding, the parking lot addition, the timeline on the,
Yep.
I think that would be probably the best bet.
Yep.
If you could,
You know what, I'll try to get an answer from, give it to you. Probably wouldn't hurt for you just to email Glenn.
That's kind of what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
How does Glenn find out that we did our homework here and make sure that we've got some
And
answers for him?
I'd say the chair reaches out to Glenn.
Okay.
Would be the easiest way.
I can. Anything else? So I have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion from Tim, second.
Second.
Had your chance. Second from Jen. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. We are adjourned.
Yes.